Okay, thank you so much for having me. It's always a lot of fun to speak with you. And okay, so my name is Antonella Manuli, and I am Italian, of course. I spent most of my younger years living abroad, I grew up in Switzerland, and then I also in college I was in California actually for a few years. And then when I got back to Italy, after a few years, I started working in a resort in Maremma, which is in the southern part of Tuscany. And I spent there about 4 or 5 days a week. And I was mostly on my own. So I had a lot of time after the office to drive around. And I did a lot of discovering. And actually, I was very surprised um, about the environment there, because the southern part of Tuscany doesn't look at all like the rest of Tuscany you're used to thinking about. So it's just a lot of forest and very few humans, very small villages, and you can drive for like hours without meeting anybody or ever seeing a car. So I was um, actually very impressed, I would say, by this, because it's not usual in Italy to find such a natural environment so unspoiled. And while I was there over the years, I also thought, is there why people weren't um, starting any agricultural project that were based on this value, that the environment was giving us. And in fact, all of the wineries and any agricultural project in Maremma was very intensive, I would say, industrial type project. And so I decided, why not? Once I stopped working at the resort, that was about 2003. I already had a child and maybe planning on having another one. And I was thinking about doing something on my own. And I said, why not? Maybe I will give it a try and do it. So that's how the idea of La Maliosa came about. And it was all really in my head, and without much practical knowledge, because my background is not from viticulture or agriculture at all. So I kind of started with the idea of where I wanted to go, but without really the means of how to do it. And after a couple of years, while I was, starting my project, and I was working with local agronomists, and I could see while I was speaking with them, they didn't understand what I wanted to do. It was just not possible to have them understand. And not only that, but everybody was telling me all the time why it was not possible. So everybody was explaining to me why it was not possible to cultivate in a healthy way and produce wine and olive oil without poisoning the land. Basically, everybody was telling me it was not possible.
And so, like, what were they? What was their reasoning behind why it wasn't possible?
Well, it was impossible, I think, just because they had never seen it. So they didn't have any experience. And also because I think me being a woman and not coming from the agricultural sector, so they were just telling me, not taking me very seriously, I would say. So after the first couple of years, quite difficult, I started looking for somebody that understood what I wanted to do. And could help me achieve my goals. That's how, after some word of mouth, and looked around for a few months, and I met Professor Lorenzo Corino. Lorenzo was a pioneer in sustainable viticulture, and I was very lucky because just the time we met, he was retiring, because he was working for the public sector. And while you're working, for the Ministry of Agriculture, you're not allowed to have private clients. Basically, you have a conflict of interest, you're not allowed. So I was very lucky because the end of 2012, he retired. And so he was free to decide what he wanted to do. And after seeing La Maliosa, he decided to start working with me on this project. This project was very interesting for him, I think, at that point in his life, because he had the opportunity to plant vineyards from scratch, which is something that you almost never have the opportunity to do. To explain, because especially to plant them with the idea of producing natural wine. So you're planting vineyards that will produce natural wine. So that is a fantastic opportunity. I think this is one of the main reasons he decided to come. And also, he was also very taken by the beauty and the environment. It was just completely amazed. I remember, like, the first time he saw, we just couldn't believe it. Because it comes from Piedmont, where you have a lot of intensive viticulture everywhere, basically. And it's not very common to see a landscape like we have in La Maliosa there.
Yeah. Well, but he comes from a family of winemakers, and he's like, since the 60s, he's been making natural wine.
Yeah.
So he never, but he didn't have an opportunity, because I know that he probably inherited some vines. So he never had an opportunity to start from scratch before.
Not really, no. Not, because one thing is to take a vineyard and then you convert, in order to produce natural wine, you're converting to like organic or whatever. And he's got very nice vineyards that are like very old, were passed on from like generations, but no, I don't believe he had the opportunity to plant any vineyards with that idea, okay? Because our vineyards don't look like your regular vineyards. Just also the look of them is different.
How? How do they look differently?
Well, for instance, you don't have the wires, and the poles, because we are head training our vines. So it's just different. And also, if you come, for instance, now is April, May, the second half of April until I would say second half of May, the grass is higher than the vines, because the vines are very low. Mm-hmm. And they're about like this, and then you have the grass, and you don't see the vineyard, which is something that is very shocking to anybody that comes visit and is not used to this type of viticulture, which we are kind of extreme in this way, I would say.
So he has his own method, the Corino method, that I know you follow. How is that different from, let's say, organic farming or biodynamic farming? And I know it's not just the farming, there's also the vinification too. So maybe if you could explain what makes the Corino method different from, let's say, other natural wines.
Yeah, okay. First, I would like to say that actually the Corino method was developed at La Maliosa. It did not exist with Lorenzo Corino, okay? It's something that is our now mine, because he passed in November 21. But it's the sum of this knowledge, and that we experimented in La Maliosa, and we also wrote it down, basically. And so I am also very happy, because I think this was a great scientific opportunity for him to also not just, plant vineyards, but also further his research, basically. Okay, so the Corino method is not, one thing, is the description of a process. So the process that is starting from planting vineyards in a certain way, choosing certain varieties, training them in a certain way, managing the vintage in a certain way, all of this in order to have a grape that is suitable for producing natural wine. And the main characteristic of this grape is, besides being healthy, you know, not having any kind of diseases on it and things like that, is to have thick skin. Thick skin is very important because this is guaranteeing you that you have a very good chance of not having problems in the cellar. Yeah. Do you want me to describe all some things about the method? I can do it if you want. If it's not too boring.
Well, no, I think I don't find it boring. I think it would be really interesting for our students or other people to hear too. I mean, I know it's very detailed, so you don't need to go into every single detail. But maybe give an outline would be helpful.
Okay. So I think the main principle of the Corino method is you cannot make natural wine everywhere all the time. So you need to accept that in order to make natural wine, you need to have certain conditions, and also you need to be in a certain place that is suitable for it. So you cannot do it everywhere. And also, even if you are in a suitable place, maybe some vintages you will not have the right conditions. So you need to accept failure, I would say, and that in some years you will not be able to do it. This is a very strong statement, is also the hardest thing for a producer to accept. And this is why we are quite extreme in this way, because it happened that I threw away wine in my backyard. I threw it away because, you know, when you don't have the right conditions, or something happens, then you cannot produce natural wine, meaning you need to do something to correct it in the cellar, which is something we won't do. Okay. So main things is, of course, a right climate, and then you need to use varieties that are adapted to that climate and to that place. So why? Because if you have varieties that are adapted to the climate and the terroir, so also the soil, everything, then you will not need to do so much in the vineyard. They can kind of, you know, go by themselves. And you know, the way we cultivate, for instance, I was speaking about grass. We don't cut grass. We leave it until you know, the seeds, it dries up, and the seeds, they will go into the ground, and the next year have like a natural balance and complexity coming from the natural grasses. This is also another main point. Also, the training system, I was speaking about head training. We respect the physiology of the vine, and the vine, like any other plant in nature, has a, you know, tri-dimension. It lives in a three dimensions. It's not something on a line like this. So if we want to respect the plant, we need for the plant to be able to grow in 3 dimensions. From there, we use the head training. Also, head training requires less cuts from the pruning. And so in perspective, you are also growing a vineyard that will last a lot longer. The life of the vineyard will last a lot longer. So we are planting a vineyard for 3 generations, because the way it used to be is that The grandfather passed the vineyard to the grandson. This is how it used to be before modern times. So in order to do that, you need to limit your cuts to the plant, because you know that I don't have the English words now. I'm just kind of thinking how to translate. But the vine doesn't heal cuts. This is one of the main reasons why a lot of diseases can get into the wood, and also a lot of vineyards cannot grow old. So this is something ideally you would want to limit. If you do all this well, then you have your little bunch going into the cellar, and we don't do anything. We don't add absolutely nothing. And all we do is, ferment with the indigenous yeast, and just move the wine from containers, in order to clean during. That's it. Not much more. I don't have much to say about the cellar because we don't do really much. It's all very based on tasting. So in the cellar, we taste a lot during aging, and that's how we make our decisions. And we work with varieties instead of with correctors, like chemical corrections. So if we want to add some acidity, I give you an example. We add a little bit of Barbera to the Sangiovese. So we need to learn to work with our varieties in order to make the wine that we want.
You have Barbera planted. That's interesting.
We have a little bit of Barbera because I have on the land that I bought to make the farm. There was this old vineyard, which is now about 60 years old, and it had quite a lot of Barbera. So we replanted a little bit of Barbera also. Barbera, people think about it being a variety from Piedmont. It's not like that. Barbera is a southern variety, needs a lot of heat, and it traveled through the Italian peninsula from south to north. So we cannot confuse. So it's stopped in Sicily, stopped in Tuscany, and also other places. It has a lot in Emilia-Romagna. And then we cannot confuse the variety, the suitable environment for a variety, with its DOC. That's something different. So in Piemonte, they have a terroir which is very suitable for Barbera, and they created a DOC. This doesn't mean that that variety is not anywhere else.
A few minutes ago, you were mentioning that what's one of the things that's most important with viticulture is growing the grapes in the right climate. But so I'm wondering how climate change is affecting Tuscany, and you specifically where you are in Maremma.
Yes. So our area is very hot, so that's normal. We're not scared of the hot. But what happened in the last very recent, I would say 5-6 years, it became too dry. So I think Italy on the whole has a very big problem of drought everywhere. In our area, it's even worse, because if we don't get the winter rains, we never get summer rains. So if we don't get the winter rains, then we just don't get rains, and nothing can live without water. So in the last 6 years, we've had 4 very severe droughts, 4 years of very severe drought. So this is something to be taken into account as like a new normal. And one teaching of Lorenzo was, you always need to adapt. So you need to find ways to adapt. And this is also a lot of my thinking in the last couple of years has been around how to adapt to drought. So I have increased a lot the mulching. We haven't spoken about mulching. That's a very critical part of Metodo Corino. So we use vegetable mulching that we produce in the farm, in the vineyards. And that's a rotation that initially was done every third year. I've been doing it in some vineyards. I've been doing it every year in the last 3 years, because the mulching is one way to keep the humidity close to the ground. And we really need to do that the most we can, because even this year we've had very little rain. We got some rains in the winter, but still very little and below average. So every drop of water that comes from the sky, we need to keep it there and stay there for a long time. So that's I think our way of adapting is the mulching, I would say.
So okay, so you don't see where you're going to need to start planting grape varieties, let's say that from Sicily to where you are, to adapt anytime soon?
No, because we are hotter than Sicily. Here it's hotter. So this is also one thing. Well, we are quite lucky in Maliosa because we do get some influence from the sea. We are quite close from the sea, but still I don't think our varieties need to come from other places. And I think anyway, of course, a lot of people irrigate, so we don't irrigate. The reason is that we want to express, the authenticity about the terroir. If you irrigate, you are not doing that. So. But I think, no, we don't need to change varieties because the varieties are the best we can have in this kind of situation. But we do need to find ways to keep humidity close to the ground. This is important. Also, the fact that we have these herbs that we don't cut. It was enough in the past, but not recently. So we need to add more to it. I think it's working. I am quite happy because last year was dramatic year for drought. I mean, and we actually had quite a good harvest.
Mm-hmm. Oh. So how would you say that climate change is impacting, let's say, others in Tuscany or others in Italy? Is there much talk about climate change in viticulture?
Yes, there is a lot of talk about that, and with a lot of industrial solutions, like use resistant vines, irrigate, spray some kind of chemical on the leaves so that will keep the humidity. I don't know. I just don't think that's a solution. That's like putting like a little patch on your arm when you have a big cut. It's not, I think people are going to have to start thinking more seriously about soil and having functional soils that are alive and can deal, keep the life into the soil. And not just find this kind of artificial solution. I don't think they are achieving much. I see even around Maliosa, people that vineyards, we have a lot of industrial vineyards. Maybe we can speak about like the history of Tuscany as far as varieties, but in the worst of the drought season, like if you go around in July, I still think our vineyards look better than their vineyards. Mm-hmm. So probably we produce less, for sure. We are, less kilos, but our vines are healthier. They are better, I think.
Well, what are some of the other trends that you see happening in Tuscany right now?
Well, there is this big word on everybody's mouth that is become sustainability now means everything and nothing, I think, and becoming a meaningless word, I think.
I completely agree with you.
I try to avoid now to say it because it had a meaning 10 years ago, and I think it doesn't have. What I see is that producers, I'm not speaking about natural wine. There is not a lot of natural wine producers in Tuscany, but in general, like a lot of big producers we have, they talk a lot about, they worry a lot about how can I show the public that I am sustainable, and they do a lot of marketing about sustainability. And they are like, in Italy we have a saying, they are discovering hot water, meaning they are discovering nothing. Because they start now they discover that if they don't leave your soil naked, then the temperature on the ground will be lower. That's a great discovery, I'm sure, and things like that. And it's like there is a rush. How can I be more sustainable than you? So I would say this is the big trend. As far as cultivation, there is a rediscovery, I think, a little bit of ancient varieties. Tuscany, I think, is a little bit different from other regions in that it's been for many decades was only cultivating international varieties, and all the old vineyards, they were taken out for planting international varieties. So there was a huge loss of local germplasm, meaning all the local varieties that were here from old times. A lot of them were lost, and now they're being a little bit rediscovered by maybe younger producers that want to express more the history of Tuscany. Even in Maremma, there were some grapes like Ciliegolo that were discarded in favor of Sangiovese, like Sangiovese everywhere. And now they are talking again about Ciliegolo, or also in some rare grapes are being planted, but it's still, some of it is for marketing, I would say, from the bigger producers. And then smaller producers, they are investing more in ancient varieties, I would say.
Well, so I guess that's a positive step.
I think so. Yeah, this is positive. Also because it's not just a variety; is all the history of a place that is around it. Why it came there, what the flavor of the wine that is expressing history. Like, for instance, we make this wine that is made from the Procanico grape. Procanico is a very, very rare grape evolved on volcanic soil close to us. And we sometimes, when I have older local people that taste it, and they always say the same thing: this is the wine that my grandfather was serving. And like, it's coming back again in their memory, and there's like been a gap of like 50-60 years where they couldn't find this taste, and it's come back again. So this for me is a great compliment, in fact, when I hear this, because I think probably I'm doing something right also for our area, to put the history of taste again on the table.
Yeah, great. Well, great. Thank you so much. I know it's getting, well, it's not that late there, but it's a little.
No. Just my daughter is waiting for homework, for me to help with homework.
Okay, well, I won't keep you any longer, but it's always a pleasure to speak with you. Every time we talk, I learn lots of things, and I'm sure that there will be others who will have much to take away from this discussion too. So thank you so much, and I'm hoping you can make it to Wine Fair in 2024.
Yes, I think I would like maybe to come, and thank you for having me. It's always a lot of fun to speak about things that I hope people were interested in.